Why did Hoover lose the 1932 elections?
One year after Hoover came to power, the Great Depression made a catastrophic impact on the USA economy. Hoover's background. His background was that he was born into a family of farmers. He was studying on Stanford, but while he studied, he paid his own university. He later served as the head of the U.S. Food Administration before entering World War I. This meant he was making his way through politics. Later, by 1928, he decided to postule as the candidate for president. Well, he had the support of women, progressives, internationalists, and the new business elite, and the corporate interests. The Republican platform promised continued prosperity with lower taxes, a protective tariff, opposition to farm subsidies, and the creation of a new farm agency to assist cooperatives marketing. The Republicans swept the election of November. Hoover carried 40 traditional Democratic states in the South. The popular vote gave him 58.2%, almost 60% compared to 40.1% compared to his opposite candidate Smith. Through in the 1932 campaigns, he wanted to be re-elected, but the things he had promised in the 1928 campaign gave him stabbed him in the back because he promised to keep the same way they were doing through the 1920s, lowering tariffs, laissez-faire, public opinion. And he also believed in voluntarism, asking factories to voluntarily improve their working conditions. He did not get the government involved in the economic side, and here we can see that people started to call these Hoover flags because they had no money, and these were called Hoover bills because they were houses made of carton where people started to live in. FDR. In the 1932 campaigns, he made a great use of the radio. His policy was "Happy days are here again." That was FDR's campaigns. He went through the whole USA promoting his propaganda. This made him seem like a person who cared about the people. His promises were to abolish useless government institutions, and he would restore the world trade. Besides, some people were blaming Hoover for the Great Depression, and this made him lose many votes. The Democratic candidate won the support of 57.4% of the population. But people never saw Roosevelt standing up through his campaign until he was elected president. He just had to do the opposite of Hoover. He saw what Hoover did and what he did not do. So he had to promise things that would help the people. Here we can see that red states are the ones who voted for Hoover, and the blue states were the ones who voted for FDR. Here, sources. In this source, we can see the famous phrase of Hoover, "Trust me, prosperity is just around the corner." Well, this source is criticizing him, just as he was criticized during that time, because he believed that everything was going to get back to normal if he just left it as it was. So here in this cartoon we can see that a man is jumping, but he says, well, maybe not this one. So he always is like ignoring the the situation they are facing. And we can say it's a bit reliable due to people at the time were criticizing him, and that was normal. So, but we can say it's a bit biased because the cartoon shows that he was like not caring about it. In source B, we can see that the problems that Hoover had, the farm problems, tariffs, bank problems, unemployment, economy, war debts, and now at the back here, we can see that there's FDR watching what the problems were. So this cartoon shows how like FDR got these ideas and promote them, so he would get more votes.
Okay, so Hoover was known for the do-or-nothing president, but he worked long hours to help under depression. The depression wasn't at all his fault. He, as a person, had only been 9 months on the presidency after getting elected on the country. He really believed on rugged individualism, laissez-faire. The French phrase to do nothing and the government had nothing to do with the economy, social or political things of the country. He was a Republican with all of his party behind him. He was seen forced to stick with the policies to keep with his party happy. Old is the good and what we know. This means that Hoover, as a Republican, couldn't help the country under Depression, even though he thought it was what had to be done. This is an image of Hoover, and this is a cartoon. This cartoon shows Hoover trying to put up a puzzle. The puzzle says, Mr. Hoover likes jigsaw puzzles. The puzzle of the Depression, he couldn't solve it. He was confused. He seems confused. The tariffs, they don't match up. Jigsaw puzzles are meant to make a whole picture, a whole good picture. But here, things are just out of place. Throughout the Depression, he's an optimist. And always said it was only a bad time for the U.S. economy. Soon it would get fixed. He was sticking to what had always worked for us, for the U.S., laissez-faire, and as I said, what the party he belonged to wanted. This optimism made him seem unrealistic and out of touch. Therefore, people started to appeal to Roosevelt. Well, as you can see this image, I chose this image because it shows how Hoover felt about being a Republican. He knew that his country needed the help of the government, but as he was a Republican, he needed the help. He couldn't get in the way, as laissez-faire, rugged individualism was his main policies. Then this cartoon, this source content appears to be quite realistic. For instance, his famous saying, "Trust me, prosperity is just around the corner." The source content matches with his personality, as I was telling you, and corresponds to his personality and why people didn't like him and why he was called a do-nothing president. Here you can see the person falling, and as he sees the problem coming and the people suiciding, he says, well, maybe not on this one. Why? Because he never saw a round corner with something good. Something I wanted to point out also, that Hoover wasn't that bad. Well, he has been in the bottom. He has suffered as everybody else. Hoover came from poor to being somebody of some significance to the country. Hoover could show the people that he had background. He could show people that he had the knowledge to keep on. He just needed some time and maybe change the way that he has been doing things, as they have not been so effective. This is another source. The source content also is quite realistic, because he was always optimistic to things and was saying smile into prosperity, whereas smile led. This means that Always smile to problems. Smile away the depression. Here. If you can see, this is an apparatus that you use to smile, even though if you don't want to. Here at the end it says, warning, do not risk to further arrest by looking glum. Glum is like gloomy. It's ironic to seem that you're going to get arrested by being gloomy or sad. That's why he's being judged by or criticized by this source. However, it's unlikely that the historian was genuinely onto his shoes, because you don't know what things the party, his Republican Party, was behind him. This is a source F from a handout that Mr. Rumball gave us. It says, the economic depression cannot be cured by legislative action or executive pronouncement. Economic wounds must be healed by the action of the cells of the economic body. The producers are consumers themselves. This was said by the president himself on 1930. The content is very, very realistic by this, but the source content also matches to the other things I was telling you. He believes that the country will fix itself. Really, we know it won't, because it needs some boundaries in able to work. He did try to help a little with the RFC, Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Its aim was to give confidence, but it was set only to benefit the large-scale enterprises. Therefore, he started to lose more and more support from other people that weren't on the large-scale companies. He had also tried to help the economy by introducing the Holly Smooth Act in 1930, with the tariffs. This only made the economy much worse, and making him lose more support. FDR has been known by many good things and some bad. He was a wealthy kid as growing up, and we could argue that in this part Hoover was better because he has been to the bottom, as I was telling you. And then he suffered of the disease of polio. He didn't have any pictures of himself in a wheelchair before the elections, just afterwards. Having polio wasn't a major issue, but for too many people. But some people did think it was a weakness, having a disability of this kind. Therefore, in my opinion, I do think that polio wouldn't affect his way of thinking or ideologies. His new policy was for a New Deal. He knew the depression should be managed, could be managed. Permanent economical, political, and social disaster would happen if he didn't take over. He wanted to steer the unregulated capitalism and socialism, and was his way to manage the depression, also known as the New Deal, introducing the federal government into the country. Hoover was known for having and sticking with the old things that he knew, but people might want to change to this point. Roosevelt now was showing a new deal, new things. He was well known prior to the election by the politicians and the media. FDR campaigned against Hoover's protectionist policies, which he thought to be the main reasons for the Great Depression. He won 57% of the popular vote, and in this picture you can see blue was won by FDR, and red was won by Herbert Hoover. This shows the wide base of support FDR got. This might suggest by all the things that I told you, although I would say that by all the bad things Hoover did, and it only made FDR seem as a the only helped get, and the scapegoat of the problems.
How far did Hoover's policies, beliefs, and actions contributed to his defeat in the 1932 election campaign? Hoover established many agricultural policies. In June 1921, Hoover created the Agricultural Market Act, which attempted to tackle falling prices, a problem that had tormented farmers through the whole of the 1920s. The act